about you?
Good morning, Enrique. Nice to be there with you. I'm very good, thank you.
Yeah, we are very pleased to have you here on the interview series, and also to help you for the participation in the European Cloud Computing Community Interview Series to help the European Commission within the pursuit to the European fit within the digital age. Okay. So the idea today is to talk a little bit about what are the issues impacting cloud computing in Europe. And we will talk a little bit about what is the research and innovation in this field, what are the business models, a little bit about data governance and cybersecurity and energy efficiency. But first, Pierre, could you please let us know a little bit about Gaia-x, which is this vision and mission?
Sure. So Gaia-x is a very interesting project. I think the first time, I know that the first time that Gaia-x was mentioned was in the conferences end of 2019, and I was making some calculus. If Gaia-x was summarized within 1 hour, we have a management team since only the last 11 minutes. So it's a fairly, we can consider it's old project because we've heard about it a long time ago, since end of 2019. But in terms of having a management board and having some really people actively working on it, it's really very recently that we have everything in place. So Gaia-x, to have it really summarized in one sentence, that could be how to make European company more competitive. And there are several ways to address that. It could be to increase the number of customers, to increase the number of transactions per customer, to increase the value of the transaction, but also to maybe reduce the operational cost, to reduce the delay. Operation costs could be how long it takes to negotiate a contract and so on. But all those activities have one common requirement, and that's being able to scale up, because all the activity I've mentioned are already part of the daily job of companies. And that's where I believe Gaia-x can help. That's how to scale, be more productive and maybe be more competitive. Companies are already exchanging data. They are already building tools to deploy their services across several infrastructure providers. I think we will touch that topic later. Building marketplace specific for their vertical market and regulated sectors to ensure compliances and so on, negotiating contract with partners. However, if now I have to summarize all those activities in 3 Gaia-x added value pillars, so how I envision Gaia-x bringing value there, 3 pillars. The first one will be how to scale up data asset exchange. The second one will be how to scale up service deployment, and the third one, how to scale up interoperability. Data asset exchange, it means that we need to have, that's one of the keywords that we've used a lot in Gaia-x, but we need to keep this notion of sovereignty in the way that we are in charge of our resources. The data owner, the person in owning the resources, are in charge of their resources and are in control of what to do with that. It might be taking the decision to delegate everything to an outsourcing company, that's fine, but you are in charge of doing that choice, an educated choice. You are not just like obliged to do it. The second part is then the service deployment. Service deployment, that's the fact that, first of all, we need to be able to find services. If we want to scale and be able to deploy on more stack, first of all, you need to be able to find them. And I'm convinced, I know that in Europe, we have a lot of know-how, of expertise, SME, startup, academics, that are just sitting there, and I would like Gaia-x to be the tools that help them to shine and extract those raw diamonds to make them more visible and competitive. So, and also the second part of this second pillar about service deployment, that's making sure that you have stack that are compliant with your regulations. So scaling up service deployment. And the last one about interoperability, that's maybe the most technical pillar of the three. That's about multi-cloud architecture and service composition. Multi-cloud architecture is something that also we will probably mention a bit later, but that's the ability to have not one or two availability zone within one cloud provider, but really able to combine several cloud provider and to leverage the strengths of every of those cloud provider. And to do that, there is one dependency. That's the ability to do service composition. Service composition, it's the ability not to define, to describe the status of your infrastructure, but also to be able to describe what are the functional requirements of your services, and be able to combine that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In fact, I have a question, because one of the companies that we interviewed before, he was a little bit reluctant with the Cloud Federation. He says, well, they were in the research community for a long time, and they say, of course, the federated cloud is something feasible from the technical point of view. He was like, saying, from the business model, well, I think people seems like they will still have some services with one provider and other services with the other provider, because yes, this kind of interoperability is going to be quite tough, but not from the technical side, but from the business side. What do you think? What's your feeling about that?
Interoperability with existing cloud provider will be extremely difficult, and when we are mentioning interoperability and portability, I'm also going to go a bit to describe a bit there what I have in mind. We usually have in mind migrating data, but data is our static asset that are really easy to migrate. In terms of increasing complexity, the next step is moving workloads. That's already a bit more trickier. And then above that, we have moving licenses, because usually licenses are bound to a contract that you have with one provider. So you can not buy the license from one software and use it in another cloud providers. And on top of that, you have the identity and the other access management. Once you have started to work with one cloud provider or set of them, and you've defined the entire set of rules for your employee department in terms of identity and authorization, it's very time consuming and not that driven by business if you want to take the decision to migrate to another cloud provider, because you will have probably to do the work a second time. So interoperability in terms of complexity for me rely on the identity and access management. So cross-cloud identity management, that's a tough topic. There are protocol, but at the moment there is not necessarily an incentive to try to address that. However, that's only if we talk about what we have in mind, public cloud. There are other domain of expertise, or other growing area where a new paradigm can be used. Thinking about edge computing and all the IoT. So beside the nice word that it might represent, there are concrete example. Let's talk about this idiom that I really don't understand, saying that data is the new gold. Gold is or the new oil.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the black oil or gold. Gold or oil or fuel are tangible asset. You cannot duplicate it. It's you have to refine it. It doesn't have much value if it's in process, and it's a heavy to move one place to another.
Correct. Yeah.
Data, on the other hand, well, it's easier to process. You can duplicate data as many times as you want, and you can move it from all over the world in a matter of few seconds. So definitely data is not the new gold. Gold. And gold by itself have value by itself. That's an atomic element. Data, if you don't process it, and well, there is it doesn't bear much value. What I believe in is data gravity. And when we say the data will migrate from cloud to the edge, I don't think that will happen. I think that, as you said, there is not enough business incentive to move data from one place to the edge. However, we know that we are creating more and more data. So at some point in time, there will be, like if we had a graph, the quantity of data at the edge will be bigger than the one in those central places, but it will probably not migrate. And when we are mentioning data gravity, it means that it's becoming obvious now that it's a lot easier and efficient in terms of financial impact to move a workload than to move data.
Okay.
So in terms of cloud federation, to answer the question, yes, it's a tricky and complex topic. However, if we want to enable new scenario about edge computing, we will have to do that. And since it's a new market, there is no history or business incentive preventing us for doing that.
Yeah, because if we would like just to compare what we are doing in Europe with alternative in the United States and Asia, like the big players, how they really know how to make money. Okay, they've been there in this market for such a long time. But usually in Europe, the providers are much smaller than them. So in order to compete, or I don't know, maybe we cannot, but I mean, if there is from the European side, there is like we would like to compete with the big ones. The only alternative is just going to cloud federation, or do we have any other means just to make money out of this other cloud services?
Well, let's see. Do we believe that taking the same recipe that brought us in this situation right now and duplicating the same thing again will lead to any different conclusion? I don't believe so. I believe that if we take the same recipe, the same action, and the same set of principles doing the same thing, in 5 years we'll be in the same situation again. And this is where Gaia-x has a different strategy. We don't want Gaia-x to be one central authority being the European policeman. That's not at all the idea. The idea of Gaia-x is really to bring transparent access to structured and verifiable service description. So transparent because that should be easy, an easy onboarding and easy access. Like I said, service deployment, we need to find first the services we are looking for. Structured and verifiable self-description services. Let me elaborate on that. So self-description services, it means that we have services and they have like an identity card. Identity card that's like a manifest file. And basically, we need to have a structured and verifiable manifest file. Structured because you want to be able to compare things with one another. If you have apple and oranges, you won't be able to compare anything. So it means that we need to agree on a common ontology and semantic on how to write those manifests. And verifiable, because if a provider or a consumer claim to be certified with one regulation, you need to be able to verify that the claims are true. So technically speaking, Gaia-x will be for the first phase of Gaia-x, and I insist just on the first phase, a transparent access to structured and verifiable service description. And I do believe that if we do that in a decentralized and distributed way, then we have our answer. Yes, we can be competitive. I'm not going to say that we can compete, but we can be competitive. We have also some numbers to take into account. When we look at the amount of workload that are in public cloud right now, at maximum it's between 15 and 25% of the workload that are on public cloud. Only 15 to 25% of the workload, depending on the market regulation and so on. It means that we have a huge field in front of us that we can explore. So even if some giants are taking 80% of 25%, if we are doing good and we are efficient, I will not say smart, but efficient, we have we can do something. We are able to do something really great. We will be able to do something really great for Europe.
Yeah, I really hope so. And that's for just to have this in mind. I mean, we will need people with the right skills. Well, it looks like some companies in the cloud computing market, they feel that there is not much people with the skills that they will need. Some they even know they do not care because they will just train them in their own company. But what is your perception? Is the people already trained, or do you think that the academia should do something just to prepare people for the new demand that we are currently having with this cloud computing?
We do have knowledge, and we have very good university and education system in Europe. Proof being that a lot of VP, CTO, CEOs are coming from the academic background in Europe, are now leading sometimes a very big corporation in Asia or in America. So I'm confident that we have all the necessary infrastructure and education system in Europe to train and have very skilled people. I'm really not worried there.
So you don't feel that the European Commission should do anything just to promote this?
We can still do improvement. No, not
always.
we can always improve ourselves. However, I don't believe that we are going short-handed on manpower and skill set in Europe.
Okay, great. That's good.
We have to be. There are some areas where we need to be more active, but they are not necessarily also only about IT. There is, for example, an area where we have not a lot of enough experience in Europe. That will be the legal system around distributed ledger.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a central authority, you know who is liable and responsible. Now that we have new algorithm that allows us to take decision with a consensus algorithm, in case there is an issue and someone needs to be accounted liable, who is that? How we do that? We are not, for example, that's one area we are exploring right now. That's really the legal basis for distributed ledger technology.
Very interesting.
And we have other companies around the world outside of Europe that are much more advanced than us.
Great. Well, let's move a little bit just to software. One of them is open source, related to open source.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they say that, well, it's a business model widely extended for software solutions, but we would like to know your vision about the open source.
Yep. So open source, I will make the difference between free software, that's how it started in the 90s, then open source software and free services. I do believe in free software and open source software that are two different things, but I don't believe in free services. So writing code for free, okay, I've done it and I really support that. I believe that we have huge, great, successful example on how open source project can change the way we envision we use our IT computers and the world. I mean, one of the most famous projects is the Linux kernel. Even now, having these conferences, there is a router in the middle between you and me running a Linux kernel. So it's helping us. And it's open source. However, they're not coming for free. The service linked to that are not free. So I'm really making the difference between open source and free services. I believe in open source. I don't believe in free services.
Yeah. Well, that's something completely different. One of them is how to make money out of it.
And the second thing about open source, it requires investment. There is open source is not about putting README on a GitLab or GitHub on a Git repository and hoping for people to take it and start contributing. You need to have contributors, leads that show what to do and basically lead the path. I do believe that what I've seen and observed so far is that good communities usually are based on meritocracy. So the more you contribute, the more rewards you get, recognition by your peers you get, and that's how a good community grows. But you need to have this kickstart and momentum at the beginning. Hoping that we start an open source project and the community take it, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's new things now moving on, and everything is not for free, even if you started with open source. I agree.
Yep.
The other one is I'm going to read it because sometimes it's a bit difficult. Is software engineering for the cloud, and here they want to know things about the emerging the role of software developers with the infrastructure operators, of which main focus is the automation of infrastructure-related activities through the use of software, giving birth to the infrastructure as a code trend. Well, this is the Indian of DevOps movement. What is your feeling about this software engineering trends?
So software engineers are.
It's like yes, instead of just having the physical devices of the infrastructures, just to do it in an automatic way, so that from this, I guess that from the software development point of view, is just code. So infrastructure becomes code, and then you start just building on top of that.
Infrastructure as code is one way to. It's another layer of abstraction that really is the what we talk about, creating cloud federation and having more multi-cloud infrastructure. However, all the successful enterprise startup I've seen and come across that has really highly demanding workload, they all were really well aware of what's happening underneath code. So it's not like I have a serverless image or API route that runs on a container that is orchestrated by Kubernetes running on a VM that is spanned across a cluster of bare metal servers, not knowing what's happening underlying, because then you will lose on performances. You will pay a lot. You will have a lot of possible point of investigation when you want to debug where an issue is coming from, and you will lose on efficiency in terms of performances. So infra as code is great to be able to move one workload to another across compatible cloud providers. However, it doesn't prevent the software developer writing the code to know exactly what are the performance impact or the implication of what they write. I mean, it's like software developer for embedded system. You cannot just allocate as much memory as you want to process images or video on an embedded system. You really have to be aware of what is your environment and execution environment. That's the same thing for infra as code. So infra as code is a good add-on to simplify the work and the life of software developer. However, they still need to be aware of what's happening underlying.
This is optimize the resources. In this case, there is a kind of latency issues.
How to create a database cluster, what is the type of storage, what is the network address, the VIP, how to make it redundant, active, and so on. All the configuration of the network and the type of storage that you will attach to a database. That's not as simple as just creating, I have a volume claim on Kubernetes and then it works. Yes, it might work, it will work, fine. But the performances of it will not be as good as if you know exactly how it will going to be implemented.
I agree 100% with that. We don't have much time. I have a couple of questions more. One was, I think you already mentioned, is about this data governance, data privacy, data sovereignty. I think this is something that is you are working with it, Gaia-x, I guess.
Correct. There is about data policies and data sovereignty. So sovereignty I will simply define by being in charge of your resources. Now about the policies and the data usage right. I will separate them in two categories. One category that we know really well how to address, and the other one which is just an emerging concern, and we have had, to the best of my knowledge, no way to automate that yet. So the first one about execution policies. Let's imagine that you have your data. You are the owner of your data. You have your own data. I don't know, about
the
sensors that you have at home or whatever. And you allow someone to process that data. You can take their workload. Let's assume that for simplicity, it's just a Docker image that you will run locally. And you want to make sure that this Docker image doesn't contain any malicious workload execution code that damage your infrastructure or duplicate your data outside of your control. Basically, you can execute this code in a sandbox environment. So we know how to mitigate risk of code execution and copying data outside of where the data is supposed to be. That we know how to enforce that. And that's what I call the execution policy. However, we don't know yet how to enforce the data usage right. I'm going to take the example of DSP2 in Europe. So that's a European regulation about inviting banks to share data from their current accounts from the users to the fintech. And the very same data from a user can be used to build a personal finance planner, so a personal finance management manager, and that it will be a legit use cases, or the very same data could be used to do targeting marketing, targeted marketing, which in that case, it's not something that the bank wants to have anything to do with that. The bank don't want to have to do anything with that. So the same data can be used for two different usage, and that's what we call data usage policy. At the moment, those data usage policy are enforced by the trust that you have with the partner you are going to delegate access rights. And that's, to my knowledge, the one of the friction point or barrier that we have to overcome to enable more data usage. Basically, how is my data going to be used? And if I see that there is anything I don't like, can I revoke the right and make sure that there is no data, there is no copy of my data left somewhere?
Yep, in fact, this is something that I heard just several times. They use my data just for this kind of marketing, or and so people
there
are
are
very,
ways
very
to overcome that by technical means. We have federated learning, we have multi-party computation. There was a third one I had in mind, I forgot about it, but yeah, there are ways to mitigate that risks.
Yeah, no,
data watermarking. Data watermarking is one way.
That's great. I mean, the first time that I have that. Well, it's only a couple of minutes. I have one question. So I don't know which one. One of them was about cybersecurity. Was about the proper behavior of infrastructure application against external attack of risk. Well, I think this is a very general question. I don't know how to tackle that, but if you have some words about what you feel about cybersecurity.
No specific ideas in mind, except that that's part of the, I would say, business as usual thing to take into account in any types of architecture and software development. In terms of infrastructure, usually the services are provided by the provider themselves, so they have everything in place to mitigate DDoS attacks and similar attacks. In terms of software developers, since we talk a lot about software developer, I think that we need to have good practices, good software development practices, but there are numerous books and tutorials and guidelines on how to do that. So no, I will leave cybersecurity in the hands of expert that knows how to apply the security criteria.
Yeah, it's a very broad aspect. Yeah, I agree. Well, finally, we will just the last one is someone they call it energy efficiency, and others they call it green ICT. From your, well, I have already some answer about that, but what do you feel about the energy consumption by the cloud computing? Do you feel that there is something that has to be done just to be green, or there is not much?
There is a lot that has been done, and a lot can be done again to improve. I don't remember exactly the number, but if I'm correct, the energy consumption per data center haven't evolved much over the last years. However, the amount of computational resources have multiplied by 4, at least 4. So it means that with 1 kilowatt now, we are able to have at least 4 more compute power than we had a few years ago. So definitely the IT industries is getting greener and greener for 2 reasons. Environmental engagement from the company themselves, and also heating devices in the data center that's just wasting money. So you want to make sure that you either heat as less as possible or reuse that heat somehow. So yeah, energy consumption is only going to increase. I mean, the ratio of energy consumption and power, computational power, the ratio is only getting better and better. So I'm confident that even if the overall consumption increase, the ratio is in our favor.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I know that every company, every cloud provider are very sensitive to that topic.
That's good to hear. Well, I think that's we reached the end of the interview. If you have any final words or any final thing that you would like just to share with the European Commission, European Cloud Computing Community, it's the right time.
Well, I realized I haven't talked much about Gaia-x.
Well, that's the time. If you would like to talk a little more.
Gaia-x is a very one-time project. It's a extraordinary project in the scale it managed to reach, both from a political point of view, but also in terms of goal and mission we have for it. I strongly believe that we have all the knowledge and know-how in Europe want to be more competitive. And again, it doesn't mean to compete with, but to be more competitive. Mm-hmm. Because we need the help of other non-European cloud provider to be successful. And the last one will be please join us. There are several ways you can contribute to Gaia-x, being an association member, but also being a non-member and joining the working group and reviewing, contributing, giving feedback, position paper. The Gaia-x community will be as successful as their members are. It's like the open source topic we were addressing before, but we have to feed the community also, and the community has to grow.
Great. So if you are listening to this interview, please consider joining Gaia-x. We also agree it's a very interesting and probably very successful way to move forward, and we strongly support. So, Pierre, it's been a real pleasure to be with you. Thanks again for the interview, and let me hope the best. Okay. Thank you and take care.
Take care. Bye.